What's up, AP Psych? This is your second lecture on personality and where it comes from. These two theories, we've already learned about the psychodynamic and humanistic theories. These two theories are called the social cognitive and trait theories. None of these, let me just also say, none of these four theories are meant to overlap or work together. Each one stands alone. I just happen to be teaching them in these two groupings. All right, let's get to it. Here are our learning targets. Social cognitive theory comes first. This is super overlapping with the social observational theory of learning, that you are who you are in terms of your personality based on conditioning, observing, and modeling. This should sound super familiar. It emphasizes the cognitive part. It emphasizes the importance of mental processing and how someone thinks through something and then reacts to it. The focus is on the interaction of traits in specific environments. Like, are you the same person in every setting? Are you different? Why not? That sort of stuff. And so it combines elements of social, cognitive, and behavioral perspectives. So both like the social perspective, the palm of your hand, the whole world influencing you, your cognition and your sense of thinking, and your naughty finger, learning, and rewards and punishments. And it should come as no surprise then when I tell you that the same psychologist who led the way on social observational learning leads the way on social cognitive personality theory. And that is Albert Bandura, the Bobo doll psychologist. He developed this concept to explain all of this as reciprocal determinism and basically put forth that personality is shaped by an interaction among cognitions, behaviors, and environmental factors. So that our cognitions, our beliefs, values, thoughts, feelings impact our environment, our social influences like family, peers, and media, and our behaviors, our outward actions, and that each one impacted the other. Let's do a quick little example. Let's say you think that you love softball, love it, cognitively love softball. Well, what are you likely to do? You're likely to spend time around people who play softball too and enjoy it too. And so that means if we're thinking we like it and we're spending time with people who like it, we're probably going to play it. Okay. Now, as we play it more and more, we're probably going to get better at it, and that's going to make us like it even more. And so each one of these, if you reverse what I just said, each one of these, you can see how they could impact the other. Let's say you spend time with people who like it. That might make you start to like it. That might make you play the game. You can go in any order, and this will be true for good things and bad things, things you like and things you hate, and so on. But the point is that each one of these things impacts and influences the other. This also explores how self efficacy and self esteem contribute to self concept. You with me on all of that? So, if your self concept is how you view yourself and in relation to others, basically answering the question, who am I? Okay, this is your sense of self again. Obviously, it's your self concept, but like when you say, I'm finding myself, that you know yourself. And so self-efficacy is the idea that you recognize your skills and abilities, and that you feel good about it, or maybe you feel bad about it. And so, do you recognize your strengths and weaknesses, and then how you feel about it is your sense of self-esteem. And that put your self-esteem, your sense of worth, with your awareness of your strengths and weaknesses, you put those together, forms your self-concept. And that is largely impacted by your environment and how you act and how you think. The hard part and what makes this reciprocal determinism is we don't necessarily know which one comes first. And quite frankly, it's most likely that there's not an answer to that, that they all just continuously impact each other. So reciprocal determinism explores the ways. One more time, I'm going to say how much things impact each other in circular ways. Reciprocal determinism explores ways individuals and environments interact, that different people choose different environments that shape them. So some people choose softball, some people choose theater, some people choose cooking. Some people choose working on their cars. And all of those things, all those different environments then have an impact on someone's personality. And that those personalities then shape how we interpret and react to events. Your personality might impact how you behave in one of those classes or one of those settings and whether or not you like it more or what enjoy being there or super rude and disrespectful in one of those settings, perhaps. And then those personalities can also help create the situations to which we react. If you're naughty and rude and disrespectful in like theater class because that's not your jam, well, you might be creating a negative environment and now you have conflict with people. And you can say, man, that person's so stubborn or hot-headed and they're always rude. So, point being, each one of these things impacts each other. So, social cognitive theory, super quick and simplistic one. What are some criticisms of this theory? That it focuses too much on the situation or the environment. Like, is it really all about where you are and who's around you? Isn't there actually some sense of unconscious motives, emotions, or deep down traits that make you who you are? Are you innately good? All that stuff. And what part is genuine? Because we all know that we do tend to act differently in different settings and that it's appropriate. You should act different in class than you do hanging out with your friends, than you do in church, than you do in front of at your jobs, things like that. So are we saying that it's all really fake because it's just based on your situations and environments, or what? Like, what's your really sense of true self? Okay, not answering that. These are the criticisms. All right, that's it for that theory. That was a fast one. But next is trait theory. I want you to put down the nickname that this is like saying you're born this way. Like it just happens. Thinking I'm just got some Lady Gaga in my head right now, and I'm resisting the urge to sing because I have a terrible sense of pitch. Okay, moving. Trait theory. As we talk about personality traits, I have a terrible sense of pitch. That is not a trait. The ability to sing well. I love singing by myself or at really loud concerts, but that sense, that trait, that personality trait, where did that come from? Okay, that's trait theory. The trait, to define a trait, it's an enduring pattern of behavior or disposition that causes one to feel or act in a certain way. A lot of grammar errors. Is that a trait? My inability to check for grammar and spelling errors in psychology class? Maybe. It's the idea that personality is based on fundamental, lifelong, stable personality characteristics. Essentially, you are who you are from day one, and that it is consistent throughout your life, and you don't change all that much. This theory also believes that traits can be measured and analyzed. More on that later. And that once we know those traits, they can help us predict a person's behavior. It also does this by focusing a lot on the differences between people. Like one of the ways we can tell the trait exists is because we can tell when someone has it and when someone doesn't. Or in other words, when someone has it and someone seems to have the opposite of that thing. The most accepted trait theory in psych today is called the Big Five. There are a handful of others, but we're just going to focus on the Big Five because it is thoroughly researched. It continues to be proven through experiments and other forms of research, and that it really takes a whole bunch of other trait theories and the most proven parts of all these other trait theories and puts them together. And so we are going to study 5 different traits and their opposites, more on that in a second. And these seem to encompass most aspects of personalities in general. You'll see what I mean as I get into it. These traits are rated on a continuum scale. So I'm going to give you a trait and its opposite, and most people fall somewhere in between them. And a really good way to memorize them, which we're going to have to memorize them, is to learn the word ocean. Learn how, I know you know this word. Learn how to spell the word ocean. All right, let's get to that O. The first trait of the Big Five is openness. So a person with the openness trait is open-minded, imaginative, and willing to try new experiences. The opposite end of this continuum of openness is resistant. These are people that are like things that are predictable, conforming, and routine based, like hate change. And you'll notice in your notes, I've got like two little boxes in the middle that says prototypes. Can you think of a famous person, a famous fictional character, someone we all know, maybe at Pius, and find an example of someone that represents openness and resistance as traits? Don't worry, it's going to be an in-class activity, but see if anyone comes to mind. Jot it down if you can. Cartoon characters are really good for this one. The C of ocean is conscientiousness, not to be confused with consciousness or your conscience. Have I confused you yet? Conscientiousness is a set of traits or trait, overarching trait, that is dedicated, or a person is dedicated to completing tasks, remaining organized, is responsible, all those good things. The opposite is impulsiveness. This is someone who shows evidence of carelessness, being disorganized, and being irresponsible. Be careful with these traits as I go on. I'm just realizing they are definitely going to sound like good things and bad things. It's kind of a matter of perspective because being impulsive can be really good and spontaneous and exciting and fun and discover and jump at new opportunities, discover new things. But so can conscientiousness and being attentive to deadlines and being reliable. So yeah, there's a place for all of these traits in the world because we all have them. Everyone has variations of these five. The E is extroversion. This one you've probably heard of before, extroversion and introversion. Being extroverted means that you exude a lot of warmth to the outside world, that you are talkative, that you are energetic, that you kind of put yourself out there. You are outgoing. How did I not put that word on there? Outgoing. Introversion is the opposite. That person is more quiet, shy, cautious, reserved, holds back a little bit. And be careful because it doesn't mean that these people wouldn't talk or aren't warm, but they're probably much more cautious about when they show those things. The A of our ocean is agreeableness. This is someone who is sympathetic, empathetic, cooperative, trusting, good natured, probably pretty easy to get along with. And then the opposite of that is antagonist, abrasive, irritable, suspicious, maybe on edge, maybe rocks the boat or pushes buttons just to stir things up. They might be hard to get along with. And then finally, the N is for neuroticism. These are people who are constantly angry or worried, maybe complaining all the time, maybe insecure, but maybe unstable. I'd be a little careful with that one because that implies some um, personality disorder stuff that we'll talk about in another unit. Maybe don't write that one down, but maybe it's also implied. And then the opposite is emotional stability. Someone who's calm, secure, easygoing, very predictable. Again, predictable in their emotional tone. Predictability, we use that someplace else. So just very even keeled in terms of those emotional swings. Okay, again, I encourage you think of a fictional character, perhaps a cartoon character, a famous person, someone that we collectively know at Pius. We all seem to kind of know these people. See if you can come up with an example of each one. But regardless, we will pick those out in class. Okay, how do we test trait theory? Where it's like, oh, great, it's the most researched one. We have the most evidence, most data. Wonderful. How? Through something called personality inventories. These are lengthy questionnaires covering feelings and behaviors to assess traits. So think of trues and falses or agrees and disagrees. These are objective questions and answers that have an answer key. You might not know what they are. And the answer key is not for right and wrong. It's to say if you say true to these statements and false to these statements, it means that you are showing evidence of this trait or that trait. One thing that makes these a little tricky is they are based on self-reporting. So it kind of goes on the idea that a person is being truthful in their responses to these truths and falses, and is self-aware, knows themselves pretty well. And then factor analysis is used to find patterns in these truths and falses that indicate those given traits. So these series are truths, these series are falses. So therefore, it means someone is talkative, sociable, energetic. So we cluster those together. We do factor analysis. We analyze those patterns and say, oh, that's the trait of extroversion. So it looks for patterns and qualities that then we can label as having a given trait. There are two that we're going to learn about. One that seems pretty darn valid and one that's not. The first one is the one that's not, and this is the one you've probably heard of though. It's the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator. This is not wildly, although I guess I might say that because I'm very critical of this one. These are widely used and widely criticized. So you take your series of truths and falses, and then you might be labeled as an INTP or an ESTP or some weird series of letters. Some of you might be like, oh, yeah, I've heard of that. So perhaps you are more extrovert than introvert. You're more of a sensing person than an intuitive person, a thinking person and a feeling person, and so on. We combine these, and then these letters give you a label and say, you're a thinker, you're a persuader, you're this, you're that. And then every description is written in a favorable, positive light, meaning it makes everybody feel good. It validates everybody's types of personality. So these are good for career counseling and life coaching. And despite the fact that this probably sounds like humanism or the humanistic personality theory, and there's some overlap, it's really based on psychodynamic ideas. And so they're not really great for research because they're still trying to tap into like this unconsciousness and just kind of frame everybody to like what we would want to be instead of what we really are. But we also have the MMPI-2, the Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Inventory, second edition. That's why the -2. This is the most used and research-based personality inventory, and it was originally developed to identify emotional disorders, and it's still used in that way today. It is considered to be quite valid and useful in being able to identify emotional disorders and traits. This too uses a series of questions. I don't know if they're all trues and falses, but uses a series of objective based questions with like one word answers or like very definitive answers, not a lot of gray area or just based on narrative stories. And then these questions are analyzed, they go through a factor analysis, and these items are grouped into clinical scales for either level of depression symptoms, perhaps masculinity and femininity, or that these items might indicate introversion and extroversion, or your attitude towards your work motivation and what gets you striving towards goals or not. And there's even a lie scale. There's a pretty famous celebrity court case that came out a year or two ago where there was an expert psychologist witness on the stand talking about someone famous and used this inventory to do so and even was able to reference whether or not that person was lying. Ask me about that in class. There's your teaser. Okay, finally, to make sure I stay under the 20-minute mark, what are some criticisms of the trait theory? That while it does seem, and based on this research, that personality traits do appear constant, we know that behaviors can and do change. So even if you have a certain personality trait that perhaps makes you impulsive, doesn't mean you can't learn to control it or harness it and use it in like really good ways, even if when you were little, it got you into a lot of trouble. In other words, just because we can identify some traits in you doesn't mean it can predict your behavior in all situations. The quantity of traits is really debatable. So we might have boiled it down to those five, but each of those five seems to have a lot of different traits built into it. So is there really just five? Because we also have theories that involve 16 or 34 or more. And we know it's all on a continuum too. So like there's a lot of gray area in the middle between this trait and that trait. And finally, the trait theory doesn't address how or why differences among people emerge. Maybe it does say this person's an introvert and this person's an extrovert, but why? Where does that come from? So I'm not here to answer it, I'm just here to tell you that's one of their theories. I have a favorite. I don't know if you could tell during these last two lectures. Again, we can talk about it in class and we can see if you can pick out my favorite. And what's your favorite? And is there just one? Or do you like elements of multiple personality theories? Why do you think you are the way you are? Good question for class. Okay, bye.